right? Those are all good phrases. And again, if our kids could say this, it would be amazing, right? But if you can give them the language, they can start to hear it and incorporate it. And then you want to revalidate and see it from their perspective. Because again, what they're melting down about is not often that bad, relatively speaking. Like, it would be fun to stay at the park all day. They're not wrong. I'd like to have ice cream all day too, right? Like, a lot of what they want is not horrible. A lot of it's about timing. If you were in charge, you'd play all day and cancel all homework, right? So you're seeing it and you can be playful in this and be kind of like, give them their wish and fantasy or kind of things like that. So you can kind of be playful, but again, you're kind of validating their perspective, right? And so all through this is kind of saying, I get it, right? But if you just say, I get it, first of all, usually it's, I get it, but, and then that's invalidating, right? And so you actually can't say, I get it. And so the next step then is to then create the space and time to calm. So we've kind of connected with the emotion. We've tried to give them the words, things like that. And we can suggest a pause, but the idea is also that suggesting the pause, but you have to include the idea that we're going to figure this out, right? This is where you don't want to say, you need to calm down. You need to go to your room. You should do this instead, because those are fighting words, right? That creates more defensiveness, right? Just think about if you've got a partner or somebody like that and you're upset and your partner says, you need to go to your room, right? Does that work very well? Yeah, not in my house either. So you might say, this sounds like a good time to pause and reset. Or you might say, you're frustrated, I'm frustrated. Let's just take a minute and then we'll figure out a plan. Or that was unexpected. I'm going to take a pause so I have time to figure it out. Because a lot of times if you make it about you, they're more likely to follow your lead, right? I'm going to take a breath, right? I need a minute. And then, you know what? That's unexpected. You're right. That was unexpected. I need a minute to kind of think about it too. And then we can figure it out, right? And that it's so important that it's not about just calming down, but it's about, we can figure it out. Because now all of a sudden you've moved from, you need to stop, I'm against you, to we're in this together and we can figure something out. Any questions about that so far? Okay. So that's all content, right? Let's talk about the delivery. So here's the deal. Your kids are going to melt down. So let's just expect it, but not dread it. And my hope is, in having some of these tools, you actually have a little bit of figuring out some ideas about how to deal with them, right? And so expect that there's going to be things that they're going to melt down because they're still learning, right? They're still learning. And so your job is to take care of yourself first, right? This is the whole, if you're on the plane and, you're flying and the oxygen masks come down, what do the flight attendants tell you to do? Why do they have to tell you that? Yeah, your instinct is to the flight attendants literally have to tell you to put your mask on or put their mask on first. See, I almost said it wrong, because your instinct is to go help your kid. And the same is true when your kids melt down. You don't want them to feel bad either, right? You want them to kind of get out of that emotion and move forward too. So your instinct is to kind of focus all your energy on them, right? So, but that doesn't always work, right? So take the time, give yourself permission to take the pause, right? Which is also really good modeling, right? And here's the thing, they're either going to catch your distress and your anxiety and your frustration, or they're going to catch your calm, right? So you can't say, you've got a question?
Yeah, Michael wants to know how to pause or plan if our kids are really, really struggling to find words.
So some of that goes back to what we were talking about before, probably, and kind of saying, like, it seems like you're really frustrated because something's not going your way. And you do a little bit of guessing. Is this bigger than a bread box, without asking the questions? Like, I'm guessing that, I'm wondering if something, happened at school, or I'm wondering if, there was something you wanted to eat, but that's not what we had tonight, right? So you can kind of just give a guess without making it a super big question. And you might even say, like, you know what, I'll be here whenever we're ready to figure it out. We can figure out what that is, right? You can let me know. I'm here to talk. So I think you can start. So that process may take a little longer than you want, but that's kind of, it would be going back to those other steps with paraphrasing and just kind of making statements about what you think is going on. Did that solve Michael's? Did you have any follow-up? If you have any follow-up questions, put it in the chat, Michael. So, so the other thing is what I like to do too is, so take your breath, right? And I like to do something which I call the low and slow. So if I start to make my voice go a little bit slower, I make sure my volume goes a little bit lower, because I know I tend to have a loud voice. And so I can get really excited, right? So you can't say, you know what, we're just going to take a breath and then we're going to get this figured out. Yeah, that doesn't work, right? That doesn't work. So, but if you notice, if you start to talk slower and you start to kind of make it at a lower level, then you can actually, it actually has a calming effect on yourself too, right? And then they can catch that from you, because then they know, like, if you have that calmness, they know it's not a big deal. They know that you can help them, you know it. And so as a parent though, a lot of times our brains are not in the moment. They go, here they go again. I can't believe they're doing it again. They always do this. Or if they don't get, I can't believe they're doing this. They're always going to do this. We're going to be late. Or, oh my gosh, they're going to be like such a handful as a teenager. And so you've got all this chatter going. Guess what it does to your emotions, right? Anches up, right? And when our kids melt down, a lot of times that's unexpected to us. So you know what happens to our brains? It also goes here, right? And so that's what I say. If they're in lizard brain and you're in lizard brain, there is nothing good going to come of that. So your job first is to take care of you, right? And just know that if your child's melting down, your kid's struggling, right? We're also going to borrow from the animal kingdom because they're in that animal brain. So if your kid, you're going to be at or below eye level, right? Because that's universally non-threatening. And if your kids are younger and you're standing over them, or if they're sitting down, like, it doesn't feel as good, right? And the other thing is to, like, you might touch. Some kids will take touch, some kids will not. You have to, you know, again, figure out what works for your kid, but maybe a gentle rub on the shoulder, or just taking their hand and saying their name, right? Some of those things can give that good juju that, again, helps them transfer some of that calm kind of thing. So you want to work on that delivery piece too. And sometimes you do have to walk away at this point. Oh. Okay. Anyway, so the next step is, I'll keep talking and then maybe we can pull that up, but we will get a copy of all the slides. We were talking about the next step is brainstorm and problem solving. And that's where you teach the flexibility. So you kind of say, like, okay, here's the issue. Here's kind of some ideas. And again, be careful not to evaluate right away, not the immediate no. And then you kind of go and work through them as much as you can. And sometimes you don't need to do that depending on what the issue is. You may not need to actually go through problem solving, but they might be. And then at the very end, then you can set limits and consequences. The message is all feelings are okay, but it's not okay to use mean words or actions towards yourself or others, right? Because sometimes we get the kids that are mean to themselves. I'm stupid. You know, I can't do anything right, things like that. And so natural, logical consequence. And I would say if you focus more on the first 4 steps, you'll need less of the last steps, right? But taking away that, you can do whatever you need to do.
So I'm gonna let you want to just talk
Here,
here.
and then I play with that, so I got to figure out the.
Okay, can people hear me now that I'm using this one?
So.
But they still can't see the,
Right. So I'm gonna stop the sharing.
oh, okay. All right, I'm still talking, but you can't see the things. Okay, got it. So anyway, so a logical consequence may not necessarily be take away the iPad, right? Because if they, unless they threw the iPad, then by all means, like, that's definitely, like, you know, an offense. But, you know, if they didn't get their shoes on, or, you know, they yelled and they were saying, I hate you, you're the worst, calling people names, like, that may not necessarily be an appropriate consequence. Then you've also lost leverage too. So, but what you might do, again, sometimes we might apologize, but you also might do or say something nice for that person. Or sometimes I'll do a jar of affirmations. They have to go pull an affirmation out, and they might even have to say it to themselves or say it to other people. So you really want to think about, like, what's teaching. And sometimes actually, if they make it through the problem solving part and they calm down, they've learned something. And that's really what we're trying to do in the first place. So they may not need a consequence if they actually successfully navigate calming themselves down and coming to a different solution. And And I think that's really most of what I had to say. The other slides that I have on there are a lot of different resources with my favorite books and videos and different things for kids. So you guys can kind of take a look at those when you get the slides. And I think that's good. Okay. And I'll take questions now.
Okay.
I think I was at the very end. Let's see. See, like, it's not, see, like, why did it go black? I pushed screensaver, or I pushed the screen and now it's black.
I don't know.
Okay. Okay, then. So we'll just answer questions.
Child is in escalated mode, not being self-regulated. Definitely a louder voice and then trying to calm the voice. Do I just read the situation individual and then thinking both as mom and as teacher?
Right.
Maintain that, step away, and probably leaning more towards my mom now. As far as the child who kind of escalates and stays there for a little
Yeah.
while, so a bigger reaction, bigger feelings. And
Yeah.
like stay with the calm. I feel bad going away because I feel like they need me, but sometimes I feel like what
I think they need to know, like, if you do those couple of steps where you're really frustrated, you're having a hard time. I know, like, you really like to have a little space. I'm going to give you some space and then we'll figure it out. So I think part of that message is, I'm not just leaving because you're having bad, big emotions and having bad, quote unquote, bad behavior, but you're letting them know, like, I see what's going on here and I can give you some space, right? Because some kids do just want to be alone, right? And sometimes that's helpful. You can't always get them to go to your room, but they might just want to lay on the couch, right? Whatever their safe space is or whatever that is.
question, what if they, I don't know, that's escalated. It's something that feels like it's and I feel like they're trying to get.
I usually will ignore it unless it's unsafe. Now, if they're being unsafe, then you kind of have to, you do have to do some of that removal.
It's not unsafe. It feels attention.
Right. If it's attention seeking, I might just let it go. And if you've got a kid in the classroom that's melting down a little bit, like, some of what I might do is, like, sometimes if I see a kid who's struggling, I might actually walk by and pop over like a fidget or something. Say, you look like you need a little something. I'll be right back over. Right. So you just kind of let them know you see them. Really, the biggest thing is that they need to feel seen and heard.
Teacher board, if they do the eye roll and the do I ignore that?
Mm-hmm. You say, I'm here if you need me. Right. Right. Or you might be like, okay, yeah, you're frustrated. Right. You're frustrated. I'm going to give you a second and then maybe we can talk about it later, or come up to me or let me know when you're ready. Right.
Try again. I'm afraid to touch it.
Okay. I'm not going to put up my slides because, like,
Which slide did you want? Let's see.
I mean, I'm already at the kind of end anyway. What?
I think you're sharing.
Oh, I am sharing. They're not. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to just stay like that?
I could just stay like that. So
Okay.
like, so I just included, so just quickly, like, there's just some resources, some general books about, some of our favorite ones that we like. So I can go through it and,
I do have some questions in the chat.
okay. Yeah. So I can do questions. And then I did put, like, these are our favorite toys and things that help with regulation, because sometimes they need something outside of themselves to help them regulate. And that's what I was saying is, like, sometimes you might throw a calm strip or put a calm strip to a kid or do something, or, again, sometimes they need a hug. So sometimes if you can involve senses, that really helps them to kind of regulate. And they can also have better, more difficult, when they're having difficult conversations too, it's also better to regulate when they're doing something. We need eyes for directions so they understand and process. But if they're having a hard conversation, a lot of times you don't want to actually look at them. Like, that makes it too hard to have that. And so sometimes doing some other things that involve movement help them actually have more difficult conversations. All right, what are my questions?
Lori wants to know, what's the best way to handle the anxiety of a child who literally shuts down when encountering homework and school in general? Head down, on phone taken away, or asked to do homework, curls in fetal position, or has a panic attack.
Okay. So part of it is setting the stage ahead of time. So, and probably having a discussion ahead of time, kind of thinking about, all right, so I noticed, like, when you start with homework, like, it's just really hard for you. It's really hard to get started. It seems like you might be getting overwhelmed. I'm wondering if we can think about some different things that might help you get through that. And then, so you start to have that conversation beforehand. And sometimes I'll do things like, you know what, the phone is so easy to get on because gosh, man, yeah, homework, phone, which one would I rather do? I'm going to choose the phone. And that's really too tempting. So let's do an experiment where we kind of just put it to the side. It's not that you can't have it, but we're just going to put it over here for a while you're doing homework, or we're going to put it on do not disturb, or we're going to put it in the charger while you're kind of doing homework, right? And then you could kind of suggest, like, here's some ideas I was thinking that I'm wondering if some of these things might help you. And then you might go through the laundry list of like, sometimes it's helpful if you've got somebody else doing work with you, right? So I can hang out, even if you don't need my help, I might just be here while you're doing work. That can be helpful sometimes, or sometimes it can get overwhelming if you have too many things going on and it just seems like there's too much, right? So maybe I can help you figure out a list, or maybe I can just help you kind of get started with like, maybe we just get one thing done, right? And if they're not doing any homework, like if homework is a struggle across the board, then you might even start small, and maybe the goal isn't to make them get all of the homework done, but even getting started and getting some of the homework done is maybe where they can be, right? So you might say, well, you know what, why don't we just start with like the first problem and see where we go, right? And then, but be sure that like, once they start on the first problem, you're like, you don't want to be like, okay, now we're going to do the next one, you don't want to, because then they'll expect like, they're just going to be started and they're going to make me do everything. And so so like, again, you have to kind of read your kid where their brain's at, right? Or sometimes it can be helpful, like with an older kid, like sometimes it might be helpful to like, sometimes it's too loud, right? So maybe you say like, I wonder if we could get some noise canceling headphones, or some people or parents are like, you shouldn't have music when you study. I'm like, well, actually, sometimes music for some kids helps, right? So you kind of have to read your kid and say, you know what, we can work through this. We know homework's a pain. We know you don't like it. You're really tired from school. Like, this is a pain. Let's figure out what we can do to try to help you do that. Sometimes the answer is if they have after school help, maybe they stay after school 1 or 2 times, right? Sometimes my kids never would do that, but it's a good idea, right? Like, and for my kids, like we resorted to actually having a tutor come because I can't work with my kids. Like they don't, like it was ruining our relationship for me to try to hammer down the homework. And so we ended up, we were fortunate that we were able to have a tutor, which is also why sometimes if you can get the school involved or they have after school help, or even a high school student or somebody, like sometimes they just need somebody there that's not you to help them get started or help them do things.
Follow-up question, do you ever recommend EMDR or ART for kids?
I don't know what ART is. I mean, art is always good. But I know EMDR can be very effective for trauma and anxiety and panic disorders, as well as like cognitive behavioral and mindfulness. You've got it looks like trauma informed. Okay. So I'm not as familiar with the art, but yes, all of those things can be really helpful. On our Invisible Riptide website, we have a thing called touch points. I don't know if you guys have seen them, but they actually come from EMDR. And so they're vibrating devices that you wear bilaterally. And like, so sometimes that can they have a calming setting. They also have a focus and they have a panic setting. And so we actually have, on the Invisible Riptide website, there's actually 2 articles that talk about how to use them for regulation with kids with ADHD and how to grow your calm. Because we don't want to use some of those like just as needed. We kind of need to incorporate them. So if you've got a kid who's just a high anxiety kid or just ADHD and they're just regulated, you kind of want to just make it part of the day. Right, that's part of it. So you can go to our website to read about that because that's a little bit, it comes from the EMDR, but it's like an at-home thing you can do too. I mean, again, like sometimes KU, but again, the wait lists are terribly long. You might do UMKC Counseling Center, maybe. I think sometimes they will do some types of things there. I feel like they have a clinic that's like student run. I don't know. I mean, you might call Johnson County Mental Health Center because a lot of times they have a lot of resources that will be able to evaluate stuff. I know pediatricians can do a basic evaluation in terms of they'll do an interview and they'll do some basic questionnaires. If you kind of need more than that, then sometimes they can tell you that. So sometimes you might, especially if you've got a kid that might have anxiety and ADHD or some other things going on, they might need more than that basic evaluation. But I might start with the pediatrician and then think about moving on from there. Yeah, can he? Did he? Oh yeah, he's unmuted.
Was there a question for me? I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Are you talking?
Yes.
Can you hear him? He is unmuted. I don't know.
Was there a question for me?
You had a question earlier. Now you can speak.
I'm not sure what the response to me was. I'm sorry.
Oh, because now I'm probably not talking up here. Okay.
I just want to make sure you got a chance to ask your question.
Michael, you had a question earlier that we couldn't figure out how to let you speak. We figured out the technological difficulty. So now if you would like to speak, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. No, I think it was addressed to you. Just there's one particular issue I have with my son that he gets very emotional about, and getting him to express how or why he feels that way. Like just the thought of the activity makes him very emotional and he cries. It's about trying to teach him to ride a bike.
Oh yeah.
And he just really has a lot of anxiety about that. He's never fallen, he's never been hurt, but the thought of it, and then it's a process to try to and some of the things you mentioned about low and steady, keeping a calm voice, trying to work it out, having him get control of his cheers before we progress. I try to use those steps, but it's still a thing, just the thought of it, and I don't know how to break through that.
You know, some of it is breaking down the riding bike principle, because it might just be that he sits on the bike for a while till he's comfortable.
Yep, we've tried different things.
And then you're like, okay, and then maybe you move the bike with him and he's not pedaling, right? So he might just need smaller steps to feel more comfortable on the bike.
We've tried that, and I do appreciate that suggestion. Let's go back to so the other day I mentioned it. I have him every other weekend, and so I told him next time you come, we're going to try to get back to it. Just the thought of that, he had a breakdown before we even got to the bike. So that's.
But it's probably not the right time to help him ride a bike. So some of it is you might have to take space to kind of get him just kind of to restart, because sometimes they need a full break before they're ready to restart that a little bit, and helping him find success in other things that might be hard for him will also help grow that growth mindset and help grow that muscle to tolerate things that are hard or he has difficulty understanding.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sorry, I know you would be like, how can I get him to ride his bike now? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Some kids,
I can
sometimes
follow
you can't, but you can't force it.
Right. I don't want to take
So did you have, I think we had somebody else in the audience. Okay. All right. So one of the suggestions that worked for one of her daughters was that she went ahead and picked up the bike, and then she just went riding around and was really happy about it, and showed her kind of like, this is how you ride the bike and it's fun, and it kind of spurred her a little bit to be like, well, I kind of want to do that, and she did try it. So, you know, because again, modeling is helpful, kind of thing. So if you're doing it with him or show him, that may also help. But I suspect that also it's like a balance thing. So also, like, I don't know how old your child is, but also like those balance bikes, or even doing something where, again, making sure that he can be planted so that he can kind of just get comfortable with, like, because I'm sure it's like a balance and the falling thing. Or it could be like, I just can't do it, but it also might be. But if he's having a lot of anxiety, it could also be the other.
Okay, thank you.
For logical consequences for disrespectful or rude behaviors towards others, cussing, name calling, and defiance.
Again, it depends on the context of it. So if they're in the middle of a meltdown and they're at home, sometimes I just ignore it. Because again, they don't, you know, and again, I'm not saying that it's okay, but at the time, because they know it's wrong, right? Like if you ask them, they know it's wrong. So like if it's in the middle of the context of they're in that emotional brain, it's vomiting, and so they may not be able to like stop that. But then you can go back to, it's not okay to use mean words. And so sometimes I might do like a job jar too, where, you know, they have to have, you put a whole bunch of jobs in there and you just pull a task out and then they do a task for using the mean words. So sometimes that works. Sometimes they do the 25 cents, you know, like do a swearing jar that everybody's involved in. And so like every time somebody swears, you put a quarter in or whatever, something like that. So I don't know if that addresses it, but those are some of the different ideas. And sometimes if you just ignore it, just like you ignore the potty mouth, sometimes they just stop. If they're not getting the reaction from it, they might also stop. Or if they have different words to use, right? You can't take something away without giving them something to do. So you want to also give them the language and help them understand and practice. So you might even role play, right? So instead of going, I hate you, you say like, oh, when you say you hate me, it's like, you might say like, oh, I'm mad at what you made me, you know, you said no. Like you might sometimes, if you can give them the words to say instead, right? Then sometimes that also helps. Okay. Yeah.
What suggestions do you have for dealing with those a little older?
Okay.
And, schools on electronics, so they have all the access that they want to video games, everything, all this stuff.
Right.
The limits, none of that works. Can't disengage, they have a meltdown, that's do anything. Dealing with that immediate dopamine hit of the
Right.
game and
Right. And is the child getting on it like because they're on their school iPad or their other things, and so they can't, they can just access it, like, so you can't block it. And I don't know about you, but I mean my 18,
but then I can't laugh just that.
exactly, then he can't do the homework and then he's won. Right. And I will tell you, like my child, my 18-year-old, like, I mean, he figured out how to uninstall Circle.
Right.
Like he's smart enough, like some, you know, like we had a lot of trouble managing his screen time. And you know, so I don't know, there's definitely not an easy fix to that. Again, sometimes I'm like, you can do experiments. Sometimes I've got somebody who might have an answer. I want to hear.
I tell myself, all right, if I do this part of the assignment, I get to play on this game or assignment.
Oh yeah.
So I finish this part of the assignment, play the assignment. Then I go back to the assignment, play the assignment. Then do that, do that.
Right. So we've got this suggestion of do a task, play on the game, do a task, play on the game, do a task, play on the game. So that, which can be effective. I used to do that with a Diet Coke. Write a note, drink some Diet Coke. I don't do that anymore, but you know, so sometimes that's helpful. So it's also about thinking about, so you could join with him a little bit in terms of thinking about the sense of like, this is really important to you. You love playing video games, you hate homework. Right. So part of it is like, I want you to be able to play your video games. So like part of it is thinking about, let's try some different experiments so that helps you get what you want, but then you also can get some homework done. What do you see if he'll come up with some ideas to kind of monitor it a little bit, right? Like right now with my 16-year-old, he's on the computer, and sometimes I just limit his computer. Like I don't access the phone, like he can play on his phone, but just not like I think there's Bloons Tower Defense, which is just like, seems like the stupidest game I've ever seen. And like, it's just a time suck. So I'll be like, hey, you know, like, so if he's, you know, not getting something done, he needs to get done. I'm like, sorry, you can't do computer. And he's pretty respectful of not getting on the computer. Sometimes I have to put a sign over it, but he does still have access to his phone and other things. So sometimes that helps, is that I'm not limiting everything. Or sometimes I'll be like, and I've just told him, and I'm going to see how this works. I'm like, how about we do about an hour a day? What if you set a timer, right? So what if you make it about him? And what if he can have some control over monitoring, which again is its own thing. But if you go like, hey, that didn't really work, right? That's my next step. Like that didn't work. What can we do next? But I do have to say that my youngest is probably more compliant in terms of cooperative. Like he's more quietly, if he's not going to do it, he'll be more quiet about it. But like my 18-year-old was like, I mean, really, we kind of gave up. I'll just be honest, because like at some point I was like, he got to be a teenager and I'm like, he's got to make his own choices. And I can't, he's too smart for me to limit his electronics. Right. And so we looked at other options. That's like, we had a tutor, we did some other things, and like, there is going to be something where, and it's a tough call, right? Because it's hard. It's really, really hard. And so I appreciate that. So I can give you lots of different ideas, but they don't all work for all kids. And some kids need to have that hot stove approach. They got to figure out the consequences themselves, right? So it's not always easy, right?
One more question.
Yeah.
What kind of meds do you recommend for treating anxiety for kids who also have ADHD?
That's a question probably for your pediatrician or your psychiatrist, because it really depends. I do have, if you email me, I do have an article that talks about it. I think it's actually from Chad, that talks about anxiety and medication for ADHD. Because I think you do have to monitor it, because sometimes the ADHD meds will make the anxiety worse. Sometimes it makes it better. It kind of just depends on the kid. And then sometimes they need both, or sometimes once you manage the anxiety, like sometimes the ADHD gets better. So, and it depends on the age of the kid. And I'm not a physician, so I actually am not supposed to recommend medications either, but I can send you an article, if you email me.
Want to give away some books?
Yes. So how many people do we have on the? Okay. You can just do that. I think I gave away 3 so far, so I have 7 more to give. And you guys can have one too, because you made the effort to show up. So that's 4. So we have 6 more to give away. So you can pick out the Surviving to Vibing or the Invisible Riptide book back there. And you have to be able to pick it up at my 83rd and Mission office.
Good. Well, I'll put that address in. Sarah, one.
I think she already got one.
Online, Sarah?
Yeah. Because I think she answered a question.
13. Karen, not Karen S, just Karen. 1. Congrats.
All right. And we got to write that down. Somebody needs to write this down. Sorry. It's confusing.
Zoe is our next winner.
And if you, you probably, I don't know if you know, but like you could, I'm trying to think like, well, you can look at the 2 books and let me know which one you want. You can either email me, and I can leave them with your names at the office. So.
Michael's the next one.
Okay. Oh, Michael got the next one. Oh, I'm supposed to be. So Michael and Sarah and who else? Zoe and Karen, just Karen.
Just Karen, not Karen S, just Karen. I don't need that. 1, 2, 4. That's 7.
All right. We'll go with 3 more. Fine. Sure. I don't care. Jennifer. That's good. We're good. So we'll put instructions, I guess, like in an email that goes out to everybody, and put the winners in there, and you guys will have my contact information, and you can let me know which book you want, and I will leave it in our 83rd and Mission office for you to pick up. All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time tonight.